Great to see you. I just first of all interested in why this charity. Is part of it to do with the fact that the image of a successful footballer and the image of someone living on the streets is so vast, so different?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately we live in the same environment. It's the Northwest, Manchester, Greater Manchester, and we have been very privileged to become successful in this environment, in this area in this part of the country. And as you can see, there's a lot of cranes going up, left, right, and centre. So it's a city that's progressing and developing, but at the same time, I don't think it's anyone's desire to leave anyone behind. And if we can at least have moments of solidarity and let the community be what it's designed to be there for, then we have a chance to. I think it's an issue that can be solved. It's something that we can tackle face on, and a bed every night is basically what it says. Is making sure that we first of all deal with the issue of rough sleeping, and that we then perhaps deal with the whole issue of homelessness and the causes of it, really, to make sure it doesn't happen.
Have you noticed, since you made Manchester your home, this problem getting worse?
Yeah, I think everyone's noticed it, and it's the numbers don't lie, but it's also very visible and obviously something that it's not something you can look away from. And the world is not a perfect place, and in many cases we can see so many of these things happening on TV, and then we make our own decisions whether we care or not. But in this case, how do you explain going home to your kids every day and you being successful, you doing well, or living just a normal life like everyone, most of the people do, and how do you explain that you're not at least trying to make sure that those next to you are having a better life? But it's not. What I did find out in recent months is that it's not an easy issue. So the first things we have to deal with is obviously accommodation, make sure that everybody that there's just enough supply for people to not have to sleep on the street. But there's an entire aspect of society and community and how people can fall off the grid that has to be dealt with, and that takes a lot more effort even than just providing enough beds for everyone. What
do you think it says about this country that people like you are having to step in and help with this problem?
I think it's the right way in many ways. I don't think we're at a stage anymore where we can only just rely on the government to solve every issue. Of course, they have to make sure that the policies are right, to make sure that an environment is created in which it's less likely to happen. But ultimately, we live in a world where, for whatever reason, we can be lucky and become successful, or we can be unlucky and end up on the street. That sometimes the difference is that much. But if we have the right mindset and we let the aspect of community work like it should do, then whether it's the government or whether it's the private people who deal with this issue, it doesn't really matter. I think everybody has a role to play.
Do you think then, given that Premier League footballers, successful footballers, have a moral obligation to the communities they play in?
Yeah, I don't like the word moral obligation, because then it entitles that people have also a moral right to expect. It's two different things for me. I think that we, in whichever way, anyone that has, I don't even think it goes as much about football. I think everyone has the obligation, if you like, but not necessarily moral, but has a role that they can play. And it's whether you accept to play that role or not. I see footballers usually being an example in terms of how we interact with not just the communities here, but we also have different backgrounds. We don't all come from England, and a lot of the players I've played with are very, very kind in nature and are giving a lot. And it's not the side that gets publicized the most. I just think there is somewhere a disbalance, and that you just have to pay attention to it, and together we can do something about it.
Do you think sometimes, given that side of it is not publicised, it's the other side, it's the lifestyles, the tattoos, the partners, Are the players themselves partly to blame for the way they portray themselves on social media? Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's almost bringing such a wider aspect of life into question. Is it just the footballers who portray themselves in a certain way, or is it everyone that portrays themselves in a certain way on social media? I'm sure the entire crew working here today has got a different profile on social media than what they really are. You know, it happens, but the key thing is what you do. And if a player portrays himself in a certain way on social media, but on the other hand he's, you know, a helping hand for a whole lot of other things, then me personally, I'm fine with it. It's such a complex industry to just break down in a few minutes, from how the money gets to these players and how it's spent and what the image. It's so intertwined and it's difficult to. But at this point in time, we're here and we can do something.
A lot of the criticism that you talked about, or that not the right images being portrayed or being reported, reflect back to some of your close teammates. Raheem is one of them.
Yeah.
But a lot of those players, those young players, are black. Do you think there is a kind of racial undertone permeating through football at the moment in that particular sense?
Again, it's a broader issue, which I feel very strongly about. I don't think it's as simple as one person writing the article and himself being racist. I think people just lack knowledge sometimes, or just lack oversight. If you go to the root of the issue, is the fact that if you think of it, you always need someone to be there to tell you, careful about this, make sure that you look at it from a different angle. And that simply happens because obviously we look at football today, the music industry, art, TV, and we see a lot of coloured faces, black faces, people from different backgrounds, so we think everything's okay. But in reality, if you check at every single boardroom in the country, there's probably very, very few black people in there, or people from different backgrounds, meaning that those who are actually responsible to keep in check those organizations aren't even looking at it from the same angle. And so I think mistakes happen because of that. And I just think that there is an incapacity to deal with it because there isn't a balanced conversation.
Because if you look at recent history, if you look at Millwall, the chanting last weekend, so there was Raheem at Chelsea, Koulibaly. It doesn't seem to be getting. We don't seem to be winning this fight, do we? Even though we talk about it an awful lot.
No, we're not. But I still think we're looking at it from the wrong angle. I think that when I look at this guy screaming at Raheem, I feel sorry for the guy, not Raheem, because it's the guy that's clearly lacking a lot of things in his life. It's that guy who clearly lacks maybe education or the ability to just, you know, be comfortable with himself. But when I look at the real issue and why it doesn't get dealt with appropriately, is the boardroom issue. The fact that no decision in this country and actually in the whole of Europe, back home in Belgium, it's even worse than in England. No decision is made with a little bit of a balanced perspective on things. There is no person in the boardroom that can actually say, well, guys, you know, I come from that background, I grew up with this, and careful with that, that's how it's going to be perceived. So, okay, these individuals are idiots, but there's a broader aspect to this thing.
Gareth Southgate said something quite interesting. I think it was during the World Cup, that he thought the whole Brexit debate has led into a narrative that makes racism more of an issue. Do you see that? Have you noticed that when Brexit started talking?
I'd link it more to, you know, the terrorist attacks. Obviously, I've seen it in Belgium the same way as it's happened in England. But to maybe summarize this, you know, statistically, it's proven that we live in a much safer part of the world than it's ever been the case. Is the way it gets publicized today, and the way that we then all gang up on certain communities in our societies, that creates an environment which is obviously toxic. We have to deal with the issues that we're facing every single day, There's no way around it. But in reality, we're probably the biggest mistake is that we usually look at things from the wrong angle. I think, that's my view on this thing. And if Brexit is then perhaps a result of this way of thinking, then that says a lot about where we are now as a country, as a society. What point in history we're at now? We have very little tolerance. We have very little. We're very quick to all jump on the conclusion that these guys it's their fault, and there's no other way to look at it but that way. And the hardest statement, the harshest the statement, and hardest the statement, the more you can get yourself onto the front stage. You mentioned about social media. Well, there's only one way in social media to interact and to get a lot of people to listen and look at what you say. And obviously politicians have made use out of that, used the platforms and so on and so on. Therefore, I'm always in favor of a more balanced view and narrative, and usually, it's easier to live in peace with a lot of people.